What could the LA Kings lineup look like for next season? We discuss that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love you to leave us some positive comments on Apple Podcasts if you like the show. And we're on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. As we are winding down into the heart of the offseason, it appears that the LA Kings are likely set for next season in regards to their roster. Yes, they still have to sign restricted free agents Jordan Spence and Arthur Kaliev, but with the cap space remaining, I don't see the Kings looking to add any extra pieces, at least not in free agency. A trade is certainly a possibility, and it does seem likely that that will be the case for Arthur Kaliev. Whether they'll be able to bring back a piece that's going to affect the roster for this year or future pieces down the line remains to be seen if they trade Kaliev at all. So what does the LA Kings lineup look like for next season? Well, here is what I have at this point. Line one for the LA Kings, Anze Kopitar at center, Adrian Kempe on right wing. I've got Alex Laferriere as the left winger on the top line. Second line, Quentin Byfield at center. You've got Kevin Fiala on the left wing and Warren Foegele on the right wing. Line three has Phillip Danault at center, Trevor Moore on the left wing, Samuel Fagemo on the right wing. And line number four, you've got Alex Turcotte at center, Tanner Jeannot on the left wing, and Akil Thomas on the right wing. As for the defensive pairings, Mikey Anderson on the left side, Drew Doughty on the right side on the top pairing, Vladislav Gavrikov on the left side, and Brant Clark on the right side on the second pairing, and Joel Edmondson on the left side, Jordan Spence on the right side on the third pairing. The netminders are Darcy Kemper and David Riddick. Now, obviously, we saw with interim, now full-time head coach Jim Hiller that things can change from game to game, from shift to shift, as far as who's playing with who. But generally speaking, teams like to have certain set lines that you start off with, and then you make adjustments as you go, if need be. So what do we feel like we know when it comes to what the Kings forwards are about? Now, if the Quentin Byfield move to center does in fact happen, and it seems like it's going to happen, then our top three centers are set. Anze Kopitar, Phillip Danault, Quentin Byfield. Now, Kopitar is still the Kings' top center. I don't think there's much question about that. I know some are worried that at some point, Kopi's going to have a drop-off in production and his age will finally show, but I feel good about Kopi and where he is at this point in his career. I think Kopi can still be Kopi for next season. It's not like we're seeing evidence of wear and tear. Yes, sometimes these things do kind of seem to come up suddenly. If you saw what Alexander Ovechkin went through this year with the Washington Capitals, he suddenly had a pretty significant drop-off in his goal scoring as he chases Wayne Gretzky's all-time goal scoring record. But like I said, Kopitar still appears to be very productive. He's still playing a lot of minutes. Now, maybe that should change a little bit. But he hasn't been plagued by injuries, and we haven't seen him start to slowly fade. So I feel confident that Kopitar next year will still be clearly the number one center. Now, we'll see as far as his minutes, and I have a theory on maybe they can cut back on some of the wear and tear on him a little bit. The question really is Quentin Byfield our second line center or our third line center? Now, if we're deciding to kind of go all in with him at this point, you've got the big contract you just gave him, and you're trying to transition into him maybe kind of being, this cute Quentin Byfield's team at some point. If that's the road we're going down, then I say let's go ahead and let's get into it. Let's make him the second line center. I've expressed caution at maybe going too fast too soon with Quentin Byfield, but we'll see. He certainly is very confident. He can play the center position at a high level. So I say let's give him that second line center position in training camp in the preseason. And unless there's some major concerns, we start off the season with him as the second line center. Philip Deneau is a pro's pro. He's going to give you everything he's got, no matter where you play him. I'm sure he'd rather be the second line center if that means extra minutes for him, things like that. But I think in the end, he'll be just fine. And he'll be a very solid third line center for the Kings. I do wonder, and I think I know the answer. What if the Kings had saw Quentin Byfield have the year he had this past year, the previous year, right? The Kings were looking to make a big splash. They wanted to supposedly get stronger down the middle, and they thought that that was one of the keys that would help them to be a better team in the playoffs. Obviously, it didn't work out with the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. But if Byfield had had that year a year earlier, I don't think they were even considering making a trade for someone like a Pierre-Luc Dubois. Obviously, that's all conjecture because that's not what happened. But it would be interesting to see. I think they've ultimately wanted to move Quentin Byfield back to center. Maybe they're doing it a little bit sooner than was expected. But again, it looks like that's going to happen for sure. And I would say go ahead and put Quentin Byfield at the 2C and Philip Deneau at the 3C. So we think Byfield is going to move to center, whether it's on the second line or the third line. So that means we need someone to take his place on the wing, on the top line with Kopitar and last year's leading scorer, Adrian Kempe. Now, I like my teams to have more of a balance rather than have a line that's kind of loaded up like an all-star line. So I would not have Kempe joined by Fiala on the top line or Trevor Moore. I like the idea of having a sniper, a finisher on each of the lines. I like having some balance. So I think Kempe and Kopitar will likely stay together. And again, I don't have Fiala or Moore joining them. I think we did see Alex Turcotte play a few games on the top line with Kopitar and Kempe last season, but I've got him as the fourth line center. So in the end, I think Alex Laferriere makes the most sense to take Quentin Byfield's spot on the wing on the top line. He got a great taste of being a full-time NHL player last season. He's got good size. He's got good enough speed. I mentioned the other day, I'd really like to see him use his size and his strength to try and get to the net more, be a presence that way, hunt down rebounds, provide screens, deflections, tap-ins, that kind of a thing. But again, that's a mindset. And he needs to be, I think he needs to have his role kind of clearly defined on what they're looking for him to do. And I would like to see him try and do that. Either way, we saw the benefits of Quentin Byfield playing on the wing on the top line. And I think that Alex Laferriere could be if he's put into that position, I think he could see the benefits of that as well. So again, if we're talking about making the move of Quentin Byfield to center, let's go ahead and get him on that second line. It's his natural position. He's obviously confident he can do the job. So let's go ahead and find out. If in fact, Byfield does get on that second line and it's maybe a little bit too much for him, they think maybe we've rushed him a little bit, they could always move him back and have him play on the third line. But again, if Quentin Byfield's the second line center, I think Kevin Fiala needs to be the left wing on that second line. Fiala is an elite talent. We saw how great he is if you watch the World Championships this year. He's a guy who's dynamic, and he's played a lot on the third line, and there's been issues with him trying to be incorporated on the second line. But I think it's time to get him on that second line full time. I think with Quentin Byfield, Byfield's a guy who's at times can be a dynamic passer. I think he can set up Fiala in some key situations. I think they can play off each other a little bit as well. Now on that second line, I have Warren Foegele there as well. I'm not crazy about him being a second line player. I think he's a third line player, but I do prefer him over the other options at that position, which would be Samuel Fagemo and Akil Thomas. If again, Arthur Kaliev's out of the picture, which we think he's going to be. So Foegele, when I look at him as a more reliable, but less talented Victor Arvidsson. I say more reliable because he doesn't have the injury issues that seem to be cropping up all the time with Victor Arvidsson. But again, I think ultimately he's more of a third line player, but I think I'd rather have him at the second line winger position than Samuel Fagemo or Akil Thomas. So we talked about Philip Deneau being the third line center. Who will his wingers be? It might seem like it's not a great idea to have your leading goal scorer on your third line, but that's where I would have Trevor Moore. It's certainly not a demotion. It's just, again, more of a thing where I'd like to have balance in the top 9. And with that, you have kind of, like I said, a sniper and a finisher on each line. Top line Kempe, second line Fiala, third line Moore. So that's what I would go with. And then I would have also on the other side, Samuel Fogimo. And then again, this is if Arthur Kaliev is not an option. I think the Kings really need to find out if Fogimo is in fact the fantastic goal scorer that he showed in the AHL. And we're not expecting him to, score 30, 40 goals, but can he be a 20 goal scorer at the NHL level? That's what the Kings need to find out. Give him an opportunity, give him a lot of games playing on that third line with Deneau and with Moore. As for the fourth line, I love the idea of Alex Turcotte and Nikhil Thomas together. They are familiar with each other. They played with each other in the AHL. They're both in the same boat, too. They're two younger players finally getting their chance to show what they could do at the NHL level, playing a full season in the NHL. I think they're both hungry. I think they're excited to be NHL players, and I think they're going to be happy with whatever minutes they get. So throw in the rugged Tanner Jeannot, and he can use his size, hit people, get on the forecheck, and I think they could be a very fun and effective energy unit. We're going to look at the X factor for the Kings as far as the forwards, and of course get into the defense and the special teams. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. No matter how the last game went, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed's the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applicants that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process. Find great talent through time-saving tools like Indeed Instant Match assessments and virtual interviews. With Indeed Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of qualified candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description, and you can interview them and invite them to apply right away. Plus, you only pay for quality applicants that meet your must-have requirements. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your job more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. I mentioned an X factor for the Kings forwards, and I've mentioned him before, and that's Arthur Kaliev. If he is still in the Kings' plans, I would have him as the third-line winger in place of Samuel Fogimo. I'd have Fogimo out of the lineup, have him be the first option in case there's any injuries to any of the other wingers. I know Trevor Lewis is a candidate for being a bottom six winger as well. I've said it before. I hope that the Kings and Arthur Kaliev can give it one more shot with the promise of the Kings giving him consistent top 6 minutes or top 9 minutes and see what he can do. And then if it doesn't work out, both sides have said, well, we've given it our best shot and now it's time to move on. I don't think that's going to happen, but I would like to see that happen. But Arthur Kaliev is the one wild card as far as the lineup that I've got, and he would definitely be somewhere in there. He would probably be my right winger on the second line, and then Warren Fogle can drop down to the third line. All right, we've looked at the forwards. Now time to talk about the defense. The top pairing is pretty much set in stone. Mikey Anderson on the left side, Drew Doughty on the right side. Vladislav Gavrikov will be on the left side on the second pairing, but who will be with him to fill Matt Roy's spot? And I say if you're going to go with Quentin Byfield and start to really heavily lean on and invest in the younger guys, the next generation of stars, if you will, then let's go ahead and put Brandt Clarke as our right side defenseman on the second pairing. And that would leave, of course, the third pairing of Joel Edmondson and Jordan Spence. I think the reasons to have Clarke on that second line are to, again, give him more responsibility and see what he can do. But you're also pairing him with a more reliable defenseman in Vladislav Gavrikov. If you put him on the third pairing with Joel Edmondson, that's putting a rookie with your, one of your least skilled defenders. Jordan Spence already has been in that role, playing alongside Andreas Englund. You know what you're going to get from him. The only question is really, as far as the defense goes, who's the second on the right? Who's the third on the right? It's either Spence, it's either Clarke. Either way, I don't know that you could go wrong necessarily. But like I said, if we're going all in on the young guys on the next generation of stars, let's go in with Clarke We're doing it with Byfield. Let's go with Clark as well on the second pairing and see what he can do. As far as the reserves defensively, you've got Andreas Englund, you've got Jacob Moverar, you've got Kyle Burrows, who are all possibilities. As for the goalies, there's little doubt who they are. You look at a 1A, 1B situation between Darcy Kemper and David Rittich. I'm confident that Rittich can be the same reliable number 2 that he was a year ago. As for Kemper, not expecting him to be anything more than just good. I think he'll be at least okay. Would be surprised if he was great, but we shall see. As far as the special teams, the Kings need to replace Victor Arvidsson and Pierre-Luc Dubois, who both saw time on the Kings power play units. PLD actually was tied for third on the team in power play goals with 7. Arvidsson only had 1 power play goal, but then again, he only played in 18 games due to injury. Now, my expectation is to have Kopitar, Kempe, Fiala, and Doughty on the top unit. Now, who that 5th player will be, I think, is up for some debate. I personally would go with Trevor Moore, but there is an argument between maybe some more balance on both of those 2 units. If you could have Alex Laferriere fill that role on the top unit and have Trevor Moore move down to the second unit to keep things a little bit more balanced out, to give that second unit a little bit more firepower, that would be great if you think Laferriere is up to it. If not, then I would have Quentin Byfield, Samuel Flagemo, Alex Laferriere, Philip Deneau, and Brandt Clark as my 5 on the second power play unit. Again, we'll see if it's Clark or if it's Jordan Spence. Spence has experience at the NHL level doing it, but I think the Kings want to get a little bit more out of that second power play unit, and I think Brandt Clark will get every opportunity to try and be that guy. If you're curious if Warren Fogle is a fit on either of the Kings power play units, the answer would be no. He has 3 career power play goals in 7 years in the NHL, so he's not going to be on the power play unless there's some serious injuries going on. As far as the penalty kill, Matt Roy will need to be replaced on the PK. Blake Lizotte also saw some time on the penalty kill, but it wasn't consistent. So I think you've got Kempe and Kopitar likely will be the top 2 forwards on the penalty kill, with Mikey Anderson and Drew Doughty as the 2 defensemen. Now, ideally, I would actually like to see Kopitar taken off the PK, and not because he isn't still a fine defensive player, but I think at some point you do need to make a concerted effort to cut back on his minutes so he can stay as fresh as possible at his age throughout a full season. How about Quentin Byfield on the top penalty kill unit in place of Anze Kopitar? He certainly has the youth and the energy to be able to kill penalties. I think he's got that long wingspan. He can get his stick into passing lanes. Doesn't have the instincts defensively of a Kopitar at this point, but I'd like to see it. I'd like to see them try Quentin Byfield on the PK and see how he could do with that. As far as the second penalty kill unit, you've got Philip Deneau and Trevor Moore, I think, is the forwards, and then Vladislav Gavrikov and Joel Edmondson would be on the defense. Edmondson actually has been a very good penalty killer over his entire career, so he should be able to fill Matt Roy's skates in that regard actually pretty nicely. So you've got that going for you. We've talked about Joel Edmondson, not excited necessarily about the pickup. Certainly it's more about the term and the length of the contract and what he's getting paid, more than it is necessarily an indictment of his skills. If he's getting paid $1 million a year, I'm totally fine with it, but obviously that's not the case. But again, he is a guy that should be very, very good on the Kings penalty kill, probably the second penalty kill unit. We've got some news on this show coming up for next month, that and more here on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. Major League Baseball's second app ready to get underway. In golf, you've got the British Open, the Open Championship going on. You've got soccer, NASCAR. It is never too early also to get bets in on your favorite NFL team as the season is coming fast. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sports betting is not yet legal in California. However, you can still sign up at FanDuel, browse the latest betting odds on your favorite sports and teams on the Sportsbook app, and get in on the action from anywhere with their free games featuring real cash prizes. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a bet or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Speaking of FanDuel, I was curious to see what they had the odds are for the LA Kings to make the playoffs for next season. And I saw that the Kings to make the playoffs is a minus 265. To miss the playoffs, actually, that's to make the playoffs. To make the playoffs, the Kings are a minus 265. To miss the playoffs, the Kings are a plus 200. So that means if you think the Kings are going to make the playoffs, you would have to bet $265 to win $100. If you think the Kings are going to miss the playoffs and you bet $100, then you would get back $200 if that was the case. So the odds makers are saying that they believe the Kings have a better chance of making the playoffs than missing the playoffs. So interesting over at FanDuel what they have there. Speaking of the playoffs, hope you enjoyed our chat with Daryl Evans on Wednesday, and we talked at the end of the show about his role in the miracle on Manchester, the greatest comeback in Kings history, one of the greatest moments in Kings history, one of the greatest comebacks in NHL playoff history, to be sure. And I know I love hearing stories from athletes about these historic events. And I also found a very cool YouTube video that went into detail on the miracle on Manchester. It was before my time, probably before your time as well. If you'd like to check that out and kind of get caught up on what Daryl Evans was talking about, I would encourage you to check it out. It detailed how big of an underdog the Kings actually were in the entire series, how great the Oilers were. And then, of course, it goes into the miracle on Manchester specifically, talks about Daryl Evans. It's pretty cool. If you follow the show account on X or Twitter, I did put a link there. But if you're not on social media and you want to go to YouTube and check it out, the title is very wordy. The title of the video is "The Los Angeles Kings' Impossible Comeback Against Gretzky's Edmonton Oilers Deserves a Deep Rewind." If you don't want to type all that, go to YouTube and in the search, put Secret Base, which is the name of the channel, Secret Base and LA Kings, and it will pop up. They've got old footage. And again, they talk about Daryl Evans being drafted. It's pretty cool. I think it's worth your time. They also, I saw, have a video about the Kings' double overtime win against the New York Rangers to clinch the 2014 Stanley Cup. I have not watched that yet, but I will check that out as well. I did want to give a heads up on this show, especially if you are a newer everydayer. We have 2 weeks left for our Monday through Friday shows. And then starting on Monday, August the 5th, because things are so slow and there's not a lot of news going on, we will cut back to a 3-day-a-week show, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And we'll do that for about a month. Early September, we will start to get back into the 5 days a week. Coming up in September is when things start to ramp up again. You've got the NHL Rookie Face-Off, which the Kings are hosting this year. You've got rookie camp in mid-September. That, of course, leads into training camp, which leads into the preseason, which obviously leads into the regular season. So we did this last year as well, so this is not anything new. Matter of fact, we've gone longer in the offseason with the 5-day-a-week shows than we did last year. So, again, coming up Monday, August 5th, we're going to cut down to 3 days a week. The Monday show, I'm expecting to kind of be, a special feature. The Wednesday show, we're going to continue to have our special guests join us on Wednesdays. We're going to have Kings and Dodgers amazing organist and musical director Dieter Ruhl is going to join us coming up soon. He reached out to me. He saw the Daryl Evans episode and talked about how much he liked it. And I said, hey, we got to get you on. He said, absolutely. So anyway, we'll have a lot of different guests kind of in that month window involving the LA Kings than the usual people that we have that come on, the podcast hosts, the reporters, people in the Kings organization, the broadcasters, maybe a little bit different kind of in the offseason to check in on some other people around the Kings organization. Of course, Fridays are going to continue to be the fan feedback shows. That is, of course, if you guys keep up your end of the bargain and keep getting in those emails, questions, and comments every week. It's been great so far. I don't anticipate that backing up, but we shall see. But again, wanted to give you guys a heads up on what's coming up. Again, that is going to be on August the 5th. And we're going to go to 3 days a week for about a month. And then we'll get back up to Monday through Friday once again. For you everydayers, those of you that listen to watch Locked On LA Kings every day, Friday, of course, is our weekly Kings fan feedback show. Topics to comment on: Quentin Byfield's contract. What younger LA Kings do you think are going to take on a bigger role and excel next year? Do you have any disagreements with my selections as far as the lines go? All that stuff and more. Whatever's on your mind is certainly on the table. Again, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And you can always leave your comments on the YouTube episodes as well. Email address, lockedoneddie@gmail.com. Social media, if you want to follow us on X, Twitter, and Instagram, we are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you on Friday. And as always, go Kings, go.